Borrowing a page from King's legacy, if we are serious about addressing the problems of District 150, the spike in black-on-black crime, the massive deindustrialization resulting from staggering rates of joblessness, unemployment, and the rapid erosion of what Cornel West referred to as the erosion of systems of care and nurturing. We need to put, as King said, the question on the table of what are our economic realities. We have to question the broader distribution of wealth in this society. We have to question the capitalist economy and talk about its fairness with regard to the poorest citizens among us. Let us take this day then to remember what King admitted in 1966, that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights of 1965, as well as the Housing Act of 1968. Let us admit that they have not improved the conditions of poor blacks in the North or the South, or in Peoria for that matter. Let us also remember on this day that not only is the civil rights agenda unfinished, but that the progress that have been made as a result of the legislative and judicial victories that King fought for have been limited mainly to the Negro middle class. This is not at all a slight against King's legacy, but a stark recognition that whereas the civil rights generation had to struggle to break down the barriers of race, the post-civil rights generation must confront the realities of race and class and the intersection of the two. The black poor experience race very differently than the black middle class. Indeed, while unemployment is high among blacks as compared to whites, African American college graduates are significantly more likely to be employed than black and white, less educated folks. Likewise, research shows that by the time they reach their late 20s, black and white males exhibit violent crime ratios of 4-to-1, with black males reporting higher involvements in crime. However, when we control for economic status, more specifically for employment, we see that there is no significant difference between violent crime rates between black males and white males. We have to address the economic issues. We have to address these growing problems that poverty causes. And while education and crime statistics point to visible class dynamics within the black community, the more serious differences between the black haves and the black have-nots are much more subtle. They cannot be tracked by statistics, and they cannot be adequately addressed by civil rights remedies such as affirmative action. Indeed, while we can teach hard skills, we can teach you how to fix a car, we can teach you how to deliver a lecture, we can teach you how to do the things to perform your job. Soft skills can't be taught. Things such as appropriate dress, showing up on time, avoiding conflict, displaying a command of the English language, possessing a good attitude, strong work ethic, those things cannot be taught. Social capital. Social capital is something that you either have or you don't. We also must come to recognize that even for an entry-level job, a minimum wage position, the lowest job in our economy requires at least some kind of recommendation. This becomes highly difficult for individuals who live in communities with high degrees of unemployment, as we know that you have to know someone with a job in order to get a job. But we know that our communities are much more isolated and segregated. While we celebrate the 1968 Fair Housing Act, we acknowledge that those who were able to move out of the community moved out, leaving behind those who cannot afford to leave. The working class, the middle class, that once buffered the realities of the underclass, are no longer a reality. These are things that the civil rights legislation, the civil rights activity did not address. The civil rights victories extended opportunities for everyone to compete. They did not, however, assure that the competition would be fair, or that everyone would be able to compete competitively. Historical racism and/or discrimination may prevent, then, even the most ambitious and talented from taking advantage of contemporary opportunities. This is why Dr. King's legacy is so important. For it reminds us that in addition to civil rights, we also need job training, school reform, stronger families, safe communities, and positive role models. These are remedies that cut across lines of race, pointing to the need of an interracial coalition. We must reconcile the point that poor blacks and poor whites have much more in common than middle class blacks and lower class blacks. Our struggle is a class struggle. And this is not to say that race is not important, because it is. But we must acknowledge that jobs are not going from blacks to whites and whites to blacks. They're disappearing altogether. So it's imperative that we resist the temptation to cast our our class problems as race problems. In calling for an interracial multi-class coalition to finish Dr. King's unfinished agenda, it is clear that the difficulties of this challenge is that the measures that one would need to take to address the issues of class and income inequality in America require that we tap a well of compassion and empathy within the American public. Such compassion and empathy will depend on our ability to connect with one another. But in fact, our ability to connect with one another is today still often handicapped or disabled by race. While I fully acknowledge the continuing problems of race in American society, I strongly agree with Dr. King's argument that a Bill of Rights for the disadvantaged, intent on improving blacks' life chances with regard to education, housing, economics, and social standing, would rescue a large stratum of the forgotten white poor. For King, compensatory measures that were truly just were those that took into account race while also considering class. Martin Luther King Jr. hoped for a colorblind society, but only as oppression and racism were destroyed. We celebrate King today because he had the audacity to believe this was possible. We celebrate King today because of his insistence that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We celebrate King today because he made us see that we do make a difference when we decide to stand up, to work, to fight, to love, to resist, and to think critically about the world around us. And finally, we celebrate King because he had the ability to lay everything on the line, including his reputation, to do what he deemed was right in the eyes of God. I thank you.
Our first award goes to a woman who was a track star in her younger days. Now she's racing around the kitchen every Tuesday to make sure people have food, even if they don't have a home. With her own time, using her own money, she prepares a meal once a week for more than 60 people at Peoria Community Connections, a day center for the homeless. One year, she totaled her car in an accident. She simply rented a car to make sure she got food to the homeless. And she's been doing this for 5 years. And we hear that it's always delicious. She is a drum major for selfless service. Our drum major in the category of community service goes to Miss OZELL MACNEARY. If our next award winner hasn't hit you up to help her out, you must not live in Peoria. But it's impossible to turn her down because we know she's working for a worthy cause, our young people. What it seemed like just about everyone had given up on them, including many of us, she preached hope and stepped out on faith. She and a few others didn't have a dime when they started an annual conference designed to inspire young people to catch the vision, seize the dream, believe, and achieve. Over the past 5 years, the conference has touched the lives of at least 1,000 local youth, introduced them to award-winning authors, socially conscious commentators, and created a space for them to have honest dialogue with police chiefs, politicians, and PhDs. It's no accident that the annual conference is called Hope Renewed. This award winner has been a drum major for hope. Willing to challenge and inspire young minds, our drum major in the category of youth empowerment goes to Miss Sherry Cannon. Now, okay. Well, hold it. I'm told Sherry is not here today, but there will be someone accepting for her. Oh, she's coming? Oh, who's that? Oh, okay. Miss Charlotte Lyons, who is a big hard worker on the Hope Renewed committee.